The morning mist clung tightly to the earth, casting a silvery veil across the vast savanna. There was a stillness in the air, broken only by the distant calls of birds and the gentle rustle of grass swaying in the breeze. Beneath the shade of a lone acacia tree lay Amara, a lioness known not for her fierceness, but for the quiet intensity in her golden eyes. Her 3 cubs, Tavi, Kairo, and Nuru, snuggled against her belly, their tiny bodies warm and restless. Yet, it was the 4th figure by her side that made the scene so impossible and unforgettable. Nestled safely between Amara's massive front legs was not another lion cub, but a young German shepherd puppy, trembling and confused. His name, though unknown to her, would later be given by those who witnessed the miracle: Rowan. His black and tan fur was damp with morning dew, and his body so small he barely reached Amara's chest. But her tongue moved across his head with the same care she gave her own blood. The contrast between predator and prey, wild and domestic, was jarring. And yet, in this moment, love overruled nature. None of the cubs growled. None of them questioned. Tavi, the most cautious of the 3, watched with deep curiosity, while Kairo sniffed Rowan's tail playfully. Nuru, always the gentle one, inched closer and rested his head next to the pups. It was as if Rowan had always belonged. And Amara, she didn't just tolerate him. She claimed him. Her body curled protectively around him, and in her gaze was something deeper than instinct: recognition. Miles away, a research outpost had been observing Amara and her cubs for weeks. Dr. Alaric Voss, a seasoned wildlife biologist, peered through his binoculars in silence. Beside him, his daughter June gripped her notepad, stunned. Neither of them spoke. There were no words. "That's impossible," June whispered, her voice trembling. But Alaric shook his head slowly. "No. It's something we were never meant to understand." What had brought Rowan to that part of the savannah remained a mystery. Some believed he had been abandoned by poachers, others that he wandered from a nearby village. But what mattered more was that he was not just rescued, he was accepted. Against every law of nature, he had found not only safety, but a mother. And that bond was something no one could explain. But what came next would challenge even the most logical minds. Because Rowan's arrival wasn't just a heartwarming twist of fate, it was the beginning of a story that would leave scientists, villagers, and the world completely speechless. As the days passed, something unexplainable unfolded in the heart of the savannah. Amara didn't just allow Rowan to remain. She treated him as her own. When the cubs nursed, Rowan stayed close, resting against her fur as if listening to her heartbeat anchored him to life. At night, when danger howled in the distance, she positioned him between her front legs, her massive paw resting protectively over his body. He was smaller, weaker, and utterly foreign to this world. Yet he was hers. Each sunrise brought small, undeniable signs of belonging. Tavi began to mimic Rowan's curious ear tilts. Kairo would challenge him to friendly wrestling, always holding back his strength. And Nuru, ever the empath, often chose to nap beside him instead of his brothers. Rowan, too, was changing. Though still timid, he stopped flinching at the sounds of the wild. He stopped looking around for something familiar. He began to follow Amara's movements, watching how she walked, how she guarded, how she led. And slowly, he started walking just like her, head high, chest out, brave. From the research camp, Dr. Alaric Voss documented everything with growing disbelief. He had dedicated 30 years to studying lions and had never seen anything remotely like this. "This isn't survival," he told June one evening as they reviewed footage. "This is maternal instinct rewriting itself." June, her voice softer, added, "Or maybe it's loss. Maybe she's filling a hole we can't see." That theory echoed something unspoken. Amara had once had a 4th cub, a female, smaller than the others. She had died days after birth. No one had spoken of it since. And so the question lingered: had Rowan arrived at the perfect moment of maternal grief? Had Amara seen in him the life she had just lost? Or was it something deeper, something that transcended species, something not even biology could explain? Whatever the reason, one truth grew stronger each day: Rowan needed Amara. And Amara had decided she needed him too. But not everyone in the pride approved. A distant male lion, one who occasionally circled the territory, had caught scent of Rowan. He did not approach, not yet, but he watched. Amara remained alert. The air shifted when predators sensed something out of place. She knew it was only a matter of time before that difference was challenged. Back at the camp, June noticed something strange while reviewing the footage frame by frame. "Dad, look at his paw." She zoomed in. There was a faded scar, long-healed, stretching across the top of Rowan's right foot. "That's not from the wild," she whispered. "That's from a collar." Dr. Voss leaned in, heart suddenly racing. Rowan hadn't just wandered into the wild. He had come from somewhere, and someone. The winds shifted that night. A low growl echoed across the tall grass, distant but unmistakable. Amara's ears perked, her body tensing as she stood slowly, careful not to wake her sleeping cubs, or Rowan, curled tightly against Nuru. Her golden eyes scanned the horizon. He was near again. The lone male. He wasn't part of her pride, but he circled often, testing boundaries. And now, with a foreign scent in her den, the stakes had changed. She let out a silent snarl and pressed her nose gently to Rowan's back, as if memorizing the scent of what she had chosen to protect. Rowan stirred briefly, sensing her movement. His ears twitched, but his eyes remained closed. He trusted her completely now. In a matter of days, his survival instincts had been replaced by something more dangerous: dependence. He didn't know the rules of the wild, didn't understand what it meant to be a threat simply by existing. But Amara did. She positioned herself between the cubs and the open plain, her muscles tight, her breath steady. The stars above shimmered, unaware of the silent war beginning beneath them. At the research camp, Dr. Alaric Voss and June continued their search for answers. The scar on Rowan's paw had triggered a flood of questions. June had begun cross-referencing local wildlife rescue databases, looking for any record of a missing German shepherd. That's when she found it. A grainy photo, nearly a year old, of a pup named Rowan, registered at a sanctuary hundreds of miles away. "This isn't just any dog," she whispered. "He was rescued, and then he vanished." Alaric leaned back in his chair, stunned. "So how did he end up here? And why now?" The deeper they dug, the stranger it became. Rowan's file showed he had been part of a special training program for abandoned dogs, meant to help them adapt to life around wild animals in controlled environments. Something had gone wrong. A transport accident? A release that wasn't documented? They couldn't say yet. But one thing was clear: Rowan wasn't born in the wild. He was thrown into it. Back in the savanna, tensions grew. The lone male had been spotted again near the water's edge. His eyes locked on Amara's tracks, sniffing the ground where Rowan had walked. In the animal world, one outsider could mean instability. To a male lion, a foreign scent meant only one thing: elimination. And Amara knew that if she couldn't protect Rowan, she would lose him. And somewhere, deep in the grass, the hunter began to move. At sunrise, the world felt tense, like a string pulled too tight. Amara led her cubs away from the exposed clearing, her movements precise and deliberate. Rowan followed closely, his steps light but unsure. He tried to mimic the way Kairo moved through the tall grass, but he lacked the instincts. Still, he was learning. Amara paused often to nudge him back into line, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. She could feel it in her bones. The threat was growing nearer. Kairo didn't understand why they were moving so far from the den. Tavi, ever cautious, stayed close to Amara's side. Nuru, torn between curiosity and loyalty, kept looking back toward the place they had called home. But Rowan? He didn't look back at all. He looked up, at Amara. He didn't need to know where they were going. As long as he was near her, he believed he was safe. And in that quiet belief, there was both beauty and danger. Meanwhile, June had sent Rowan's photo to a woman named Evelyn Marsh, a former volunteer at the sanctuary Rowan had come from. Evelyn responded almost immediately. "That's him. That's Rowan," she wrote. "We thought he was dead." Her message included a heart-wrenching detail. Rowan had disappeared after a supply truck accident during a routine animal relocation. He was only 5 weeks old at the time. No one had seen him since. No one imagined he could have survived alone, let alone in lion territory. Back in the field, Dr. Voss made a difficult decision. "We may have to intervene," he told June. "If that male catches Rowan's scent again, he won't hesitate." But June hesitated. "If we take him now, it could destroy everything Amara's built with him. It's not just survival anymore, it's a bond." Alaric looked out at the plains through his scope, then whispered, "And that bond might be the only thing saving him." The male lion's presence was no longer subtle. His roars echoed across the dry plains in the late afternoon, claiming territory that wasn't his. Amara growled low in her throat, her body tense as she stood between the cubs and the distant sound. Rowan's ears flattened, sensing her fear. For the first time, he tucked his tail and moved closer to Nuru, who instinctively pressed against him. The message was clear. Danger was no longer a possibility. It was a promise. And as the sun began to set behind the acacia trees, casting long shadows across the earth, Amara lifted her head to the sky and released a low, warning roar, a sound meant for only one creature. He was coming. The grass barely moved, but Amara felt him. The male lion was close, too close. She crouched low, her breath shallow, eyes locked on the edge of the thicket where the breeze shifted unnaturally. Behind her, the cubs huddled together. Rowan stood out, not just in color, but in scent, in energy. He didn't belong, and the wild knew it. Amara had protected him for as long as she could, but she also knew what nature demanded when balance was threatened. The male appeared like a shadow torn from the earth. Massive, scarred, and burning with territorial fury, he stepped into view. His golden eyes scanned the cubs, then locked on Rowan. There was no hesitation, no confusion. He charged. Amara roared, throwing herself forward with terrifying force, intercepting him mid-stride. Dust exploded beneath them as the two lions collided, claws slashing, teeth flashing, the savanna echoing with primal violence. Rowan froze, paralyzed by the sound, the fury. Nuru nudged him, urging him to run, but Rowan didn't understand. He didn't know where to go. His paws scrambled in the dirt, spinning in place as the world erupted behind him. Kairo and Tavi followed Amara's orders, running into the bush, but Rowan stumbled, lost between instinct and terror. Then June's voice cracked through the radio at the research outpost. "He won't make it. We have to get him now." Dr. Voss had already climbed into the vehicle. "If we wait, we'll be recovering a body." The truck tore through the grass, bouncing violently as they closed in on the scene. Through the dust, they saw the battle, Amara, bloodied but unrelenting, standing between Rowan and death itself. The male lion paced now, wounded but not retreating. He eyed Rowan like unfinished prey, his tail whipping angrily. Amara turned to Rowan, breathing heavy, blood trailing from her shoulder. Her gaze was full of something ancient, something Rowan couldn't understand, but felt deep in his bones. She let out a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, but a release. A signal. A goodbye. Then, she turned back to the male lion and leapt once more, giving everything she had. Behind them, the truck screeched to a halt. June jumped out, arms open. "Rowan!" she screamed. For a second, He didn't move. Then, as if pulled by the memory of another life, he ran, straight into her arms. Rowan sat in the corner of the holding tent, trembling. His fur was still dust-covered, patches stained with blood that wasn't his. His chest rose and fell rapidly, ears twitching at every sound outside. June knelt beside him, her hand hovering over his back, not quite touching. "You're safe now," she whispered. But Rowan didn't know what that meant. The one who had kept him safe, who had fought for him, was gone. And no human word could fill the space Amara had left behind. At the edge of the reserve, a distant roar echoed faintly across the plains. It was impossible to tell if it belonged to the male or Amara. The battle had disappeared into the tall grass, and they hadn't been able to follow. Dr. Voss, standing nearby, looked grim. If she survived, she'll never return to the den. Not now. June didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on Rowan. He hadn't made a sound since they pulled him into the truck. Not a bark, not a whimper. Just silence. Word of the event spread quickly among the reserve staff. That evening, Mabel Hargrove arrived. Older, with soft, lined hands and a deep calm in her presence, she had worked with wild animals for over 40 years. She entered the tent without hesitation and sat beside Rowan. She didn't speak, didn't reach. She simply waited. After several minutes, Rowan shifted. He sniffed the air, then slowly leaned toward her. His head dropped gently into her lap. "That's grief," Mabel said quietly. "He's mourning." Her voice was soft but certain. "They think animals don't feel loss the way we do. They're wrong." June sat across from her, tears brimming in her eyes. She saved him, again and again, and now he thinks she's gone because of him. Mabel nodded. That kind of bond doesn't end when you pull a pup from danger. It stays inside them, shaping every breath they take after. That night, Rowan finally slept, curled into a blanket in the corner. He didn't stir even as thunder rolled in the distance. But his dreams were restless, full of flashes of fur, roars, warmth, and dust. He whimpered once in his sleep, the sound barely audible. June stayed beside him, listening. And far out in the wild, under a bruised sky and rising wind, a lone figure limped through the grass. Her body bore the marks of battle, her pace slow, but her head remained high. Amara was alive. But she did not return to the den. She walked in silence, carrying a memory that would never leave her. The days that followed blurred together in quiet routines. Rowan ate, but without interest. He slept, but never deeply. He responded to his name, but only faintly. June took him for slow walks around the perimeter of the reserve compound, careful not to let him see the open plains. She spoke gently, always narrating what she saw, hoping her voice might be enough to tether him back to this world. But Rowan wasn't sure which world he belonged to anymore. He no longer moved like a domestic dog. His steps were quiet, measured, cautious like a predator. He didn't bark when other animals approached. He lowered his body, watched, waited, just as Amara had taught him. The staff watched in awe as he stalked shadows, eyes calculating. It was as though the savanna had carved itself into his bones. He was no longer just a dog, but he wasn't a lion either. He was something in between. One afternoon, June brought him a small plush toy shaped like a lion cub. She smiled as she offered it, unsure what to expect. Rowan stared at it for a long moment before gently taking it in his mouth and walking to a quiet corner. There, he curled around it, not to play, but to protect, just like Amara had done with him. When June saw this, she turned away so Rowan wouldn't see her cry. Mabel visited often now, sitting beside Rowan in the shade. "He's healing," she told June one morning. "But the wound isn't just physical. He's lost a language only animals understand. June nodded, eyes fixed on Rowan as he lay in the dirt, ears twitching at distant bird calls. "Do you think he remembers her?" she asked. Mabel smiled gently. "No animal forgets the one who gave them love in the wild. It becomes part of their spirit." That night, June left the gate of Rowan's enclosure open. Just for a few minutes. Just to see what he would do. Rowan noticed immediately. He stood, stared out at the vast field beyond. The moonlight danced across the grass, and for a moment he took a step forward. Then another. The wild called to him. But before reaching the edge of the light, he stopped and turned back. Rowan returned to June, lay at her feet, and rested his head against her leg. He hadn't forgotten Amara. But he wasn't lost anymore. He was beginning to understand that he wasn't choosing between two worlds. He was becoming something neither world expected. It happened during a routine walk at dawn. The sky was still pale, the wind cool and steady. June had brought Rowan out early, hoping the quiet would soothe him. They walked along the eastern edge of the reserve, near the training enclosures, where a group of juvenile lions had recently been relocated. Most dogs would freeze, bark, or back away at the scent, but not Rowan. He slowed, ears forward, and tilted his head. Then, without command, he sat, watching them with stillness that sent a chill down June's spine. One of the young lions, a lanky male with unsteady paws, approached the fence. The others hung back, wary. But the young male came closer, nose twitching, eyes locked on Rowan. Rowan didn't growl. He didn't step back. He rose, slowly, and approached. They stood just feet apart, separated by a mesh wire that buzzed softly with electricity. Neither blinked. Then Rowan did something no one expected. He lowered his head, crouched, and offered a quiet whine. Submission. Recognition. Something deeper than memory stirred inside him. June stood frozen. "Is he greeting him?" she whispered. Dr. Voss, watching from a distance, nodded slowly. "That's not learned behavior. That's legacy." Mabel, who had joined them silently, added, "Rowan isn't remembering how to be a dog. He's remembering how to be who he became out there." It was a turning point. No longer just surviving. Rowan was now influencing, leading, teaching. Even the young lion mirrored his movements, pawing the ground gently, mimicking Rowan's stillness. But the calm didn't last. Later that afternoon, a commotion broke out near the southern fence. Two wild hyenas had slipped through a weak section and begun harassing a small antelope caught near the edge. The staff scrambled to respond, but Rowan had already moved. Before anyone could stop him, he slipped through a gate left ajar and sprinted toward the chaos. June shouted after him, panic in her voice, but Rowan didn't stop. He ran like a lion, not in fear, but with purpose. He reached the scene in seconds. The hyenas snapped and lunged, but Rowan charged with a snarl so fierce it stunned even the staff. He circled the antelope, placing himself between the threat and the prey. One hyena lunged, and Rowan met it head-on, his body a blur of instinct and defiance. The second hesitated, then both retreated into the brush, snarling as they disappeared. Rowan stood still, chest heaving, the young antelope trembling behind him. And in that moment, everyone watching understood. Rowan wasn't caught between two worlds anymore. He had become the bridge. The news spread quickly through the reserve. Rowan had saved a life. Not by chance, not by luck, but by choice. In the following days, the staff looked at him differently, not as a rescued animal, but as a presence, a force. His courage had silenced doubts. But it was the look in his eyes afterward that struck everyone most. He hadn't looked proud. He had looked calm, like something had finally aligned inside him. June noticed it first. The way he stopped flinching at sudden noises, how his ears no longer twitched nervously at lion calls. He began moving through the compound with a quiet confidence, even guiding other rescue animals during their adjustment periods. Dogs followed him, instinctively drawn to his steady energy. And even some of the lions near the fence line seemed less aggressive when he was near. Rowan had become more than a symbol. He was a guide, a protector. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of deep orange and purple, June brought Rowan to a quiet ridge overlooking the savanna. He sat beside her, the breeze rustling through his fur. "I don't know what you are anymore," she whispered, smiling gently. "But whatever it is, it's something we needed." Rowan's eyes scanned the distance, and then he froze. Just for a second. His ears perked. His nose lifted slightly. The wind carried something familiar. At first, June saw nothing. But then, far, far out along the tree line, a golden shape moved. Slow, limping, but unmistakable. Amara. Thin, scarred, but alive. She did not approach. She stood at a distance, eyes locked on Rowan. June's breath caught in her throat. She knew better than to call out or move too quickly. Rowan stood slowly, his tail still, his body straight. They stared at one another for what felt like eternity. A mother. A son. A connection stretched across silence and space. Rowan didn't run toward her. Amara didn't come closer. There were no cries, no howls. Just stillness. Respect. Recognition. And then, as the wind shifted again, Amara turned, disappearing once more into the tall grass. She had come for one reason only, to see that he had made it. Rowan didn't follow. He returned to June's side and sat again. He looked out across the wild, no longer searching, because now he knew the truth. She was part of him. Always had been. Always would be. Months passed, and the seasons shifted. The savanna, once dry and brittle, bloomed again with life. Grass swayed tall under the wind. Herds returned. New cubs were born. But in one small corner of the reserve, something different had also grown. A bridge between two worlds, forged not by science or training, but by the heart of one animal who had never truly belonged anywhere. And yet, somehow, had come to belong everywhere. Rowan now lived freely within the boundaries of the reserve, unconfined, yet always near. He chose when to visit the enclosures, when to wander the open fields. He was no longer watched for safety. He was observed for wisdom. New rescue animals, frightened and disoriented, were often calmed by his quiet presence. Lions, too, seemed to react differently when Rowan was near the fencing. Less territorial, more curious. Whatever he had learned from Amara, he carried it like an unspoken language. And others listened. June continued her work, always with Rowan by her side. "He teaches more by existing than most of us do by talking," she told a visiting journalist. The article went viral. People around the world read about the lioness who raised a dog, and the dog who became something more. But what the article didn't capture, what only those who had seen Rowan up close truly understood, was that his greatest gift wasn't survival. It was connection. One evening, June found him lying beneath the same acacia tree where it had all begun. The wind was soft, the sky burning gold. She sat beside him without speaking. Rowan shifted and gently laid his head in her lap. His eyes were tired, but peaceful. In the distance, lions called to one another, deep, echoing roars across the grasslands. Rowan listened, but didn't move. He had no need to chase or flee. That call wasn't for him anymore. It was simply part of him now. Later that week, the reserve staff unveiled a small plaque at the edge of the ridge where Amara had last been seen. It read, "To the one who chose love over law, your spirit lives on." Rowan stood beside it, tail still, eyes steady. He didn't need to understand the words. He was the message. And in that final light of day, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the sky turned silent, Rowan turned once more to the wind. He closed his eyes, lifted his face to the breeze, and stood still, not as a dog, not as a lion, but as a soul that had loved and been loved without limits.